Monday, and welcome back to the Lorden Arts channel. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here today. Case Cracked is the show where we look into a mystery, and what are the critical pieces that help solve that mystery. Today's episode is called Robin Hood, He's Not. It was July 11th, 1969 in Cleveland, Ohio. At the Society National Bank headquarters, employees were arriving for their shifts, but one person stuck out from the rest of the crowd. His name was Theodore Conrad, and it was his 20th birthday. As he walked past security guards and coworkers, he told them the good news while holding a bottle of whiskey he bought for the occasion in a brown paper bag. All day long, Theodore, who was one of a few employees trusted to work as a vault teller for the bank, showed everyone he met his present to himself and received many happy birthday wishes. At the end of the day, he gathered up the whiskey and cigarettes that he had carried around in that bag all day, waved goodbye to his coworkers, and told everyone to have a good weekend. When the bank opened on Monday morning, Theodore, who had been a solid employee who never missed work, failed to show up, and he couldn't be reached by telephone. Someone else would have to cover his position, stepping in to package money to be delivered to other Society Bank branches around town. But when the vault was checked, it was found that $215,000 was missing. Today, adjusted for inflation, that would be around $1.7 million. How did this happen? No alarms had been tripped, and there was no break-in during the weekend. That's when everyone started to think about Theodore and his brown paper bag. A call to the police was made. That brought them, as well as U.S. Marshals and the FBI, to the scene. As investigators began their work, one of their first questions was, who is Theodore Conrad? Conrad was born in Denver, Colorado, to Edward Conrad, a Navy officer, and his wife, Ruthabeth, who would go on to have a daughter as well. When his parents divorced in 1958, he chose to live with his mother and sister in Lakewood, Ohio, rather than bounce around the country to different naval bases with his father. After he graduated high school, he attended college at New England College in New Hampshire, where his father was teaching political science. However, at the end of his first semester, he chose to move back to Ohio and went on to take classes at Cuyahoga Community College. He was well liked among his peers and smarter than most, with his IQ of 135. He had no criminal history and no fingerprints for him were on file. Federal agents tracked down and investigated all possible leads. This led them across the United States, from California to Hawaii, Texas, and Oregon. Some thought he would escape to a beach and enjoy the sun, and others thought he would try to disappear in Europe. None of those leads led them to Conrad. A summary report compiled by the U.S. Marshals said, quote, "To all appearances, Conrad was that all-American boy whose character was not questioned and seemed to be a model of responsibility during a turbulent time." Local agents had questioned his friends and family and heard about a recent shift in his personality. The year prior, Conrad had become obsessed with the Steve McQueen movie, The Thomas Crown Affair. According to IMDb.com, McQueen plays a debonair, adventuresome bank executive who believes he has pulled off the perfect multi-million-dollar heist. Before Conrad's disappearance, he began mimicking McQueen's love of sports cars by driving an MG. He also drank expensive gin and began to show off while playing golf or billiards. Conrad took things a step further when he began to tell friends how easy it would be to steal from Society National Bank, and even laid out his plan. By taking the money on a Friday, he insisted he would have a 2-day head start before anything was found amiss. On the 11th, his supervisor was out having surgery, and Conrad saw his opportunity. At about noon, he told a friend that he was going through with the robbery. The man simply didn't believe him. At 4:30 p.m., he left the bank with his bag of whiskey, cigarettes, and $215,000. Authorities never detailed how he got the money out of the bank, but it's believed that the bills were in his brown paper bag in large denominations. From there, it was found that he traveled to his apartment on Clifton Boulevard before grabbing a taxicab to Cleveland Hopkins International Airport. Considering what passenger tracking was like back then, by 8:30 that night, he was lost to everyone. At first, the case was worked diligently, but as the years went by, it went cold. The case was featured on America's Most Wanted and Unsolved Mysteries, but nothing came of it. At one point, a letter from Conrad to his girlfriend was found. In it, he admitted to the robbery and expressed his regret for having basically ruined his own life. He would always have to hide now, never able to see the people he left behind. The letter didn't provide any new leads. But there was one person who never gave up on the case, Deputy U.S. Marshal John Elliott. Elliott collected all he could find on Conrad, from his college applications to any paperwork found by other agencies, saving all the material that he could that contained the man's handwriting for future comparison. With no fingerprints and no criminal records, it was going to be hard to catch Conrad, and wanted posters became less and less useful as the years passed by. Elliott felt he would catch Conrad through signatures. By the time he retired from the Marshal Service in 1990, he had amassed a huge file full of interviews with the family, as well as a vast array of documents. Some of his work was turned over to Interpol, with Elliott saying, quote, "One of the reasons I stayed after this guy is that some people thought he was some kind of hero or Robin Hood. He's not." In retirement, he was able to continue working Conrad's case by passing the torch to his son, 39-year-old U.S. Marshal Peter Elliott. Peter and his father talked often about the case and continued their search until John's death in 2020. Recently, an obituary found its way into Peter's hands. It talked about a man named Thomas Randell of Linfield, Massachusetts. Was this Conrad? To find out, he would have to travel to Massachusetts and compare handwriting samples. When the signatures from one of Conrad's college applications were compared to bankruptcy paperwork that had been filed in 2014 by Randell, they were found to be so similar that Elliott had to investigate further. It appeared that Randell moved to Linfield, Massachusetts in the 1970s. In the early 80s, he married his wife Kathy and would go on to have one daughter. Linfield was close to the location where the Thomas Crown affair had been filmed. Randell sold luxury cars for nearly 40 years in the Boston area and taught golf at a local country club while spending his winters in Florida playing on a pro tour. Peter Elliott was convinced that this was his man. Quote, "He covered his trail really well," Elliott said. "It's really unbelievable that he lived the way he did for so many years. He was so good at it." Conrad seemed to spend little of his fortune until recent years when his family struggled financially. Unfortunately, Elliott would not be able to question the man about the heist, as he had died from lung cancer on May 18th, 2021, at 71 years old. When Elliott spoke with Randell's family, he was told that while he was on his deathbed, Conrad had confided his real identity to them, which they chose not to report. No charges will be filed against them. When his wife Kathy was asked about the case, she replied, quote, "I'm still grieving the loss of my husband, who was a great man," and she declined any further comments. When asked about solving the case, Elliott stated that he felt bad for Conrad's family, who were living under a fictitious name with a man they never really knew. Elliott wishes his father had been alive to see resolution on this case, but he says, quote, "I hope my father is resting a little easier today, knowing his investigation and his United States Marshal Service brought closure to this decades-long mystery. Everything in real life doesn't always end like in the movies." Case cracked. Thank you, Cleveland.com, the New York Times, the New York Post, NPR.org, People.com, USMarshals.gov, and Newspapers.com for information contributing to today's story. Of course, the biggest thank you goes to Christy Arnhart for researching and writing it up, and here she is now to discuss it with us. Christy, one of the biggest questions in my mind after going through this case, why take that level of intelligence and use it in this way? It's such a, I mean, it almost seems like there is a level of brilliance to it, to the point where I'm wondering if Peter Elliott actually kind of liked the guy. Like there was that one quote where it was kind of like he talked about how good he was at it. And if we look at a lot of crimes where there's a horrible violent component and things like that, there's none of that in here. This is a straight robbery, but no stick up, no weapons used. I mean, and then the guy just disappears. Such a level of intelligence to go about life in such a simple and disappointing way. Like, I'm just going to steal a bunch of money and then I'm going to go play golf. Like, it's blowing my mind a little bit. What could this guy could have done something with that level of intelligence? Could have helped the world in some way,
Well, yeah, but not everybody feels that obligation. And at the age he was at, I really just felt like he wanted to pull it off to see if he could, and didn't think about the future consequences.
Yeah, that seems pretty clear, especially with the letter that the girlfriend finds. But it's just really kicking at me because there's so much I think that someone with that level of intelligence could contribute to society.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and here's this guy, and he's literally taking from Society Bank. He's literally robbing from Society Bank.
Oh, yeah. I know. And if you think about it this way, a score of 116 or more is considered above average. Now, a score of 130 or higher signals high IQ. Membership into Mensa, the High IQ Society, includes people who score in the top 2%, and that's usually 132 or higher. So he was just a little bit above the bar there.
Guy could have been in Mensa. I mean, come on. Well,
I know. And what did he choose to do? Sell cars and play golf. He chose to do what made him happy.
Ultimately, yeah. I mean, there is a truth to that, right? I mean, I'd really have to think about it. One big heist for me to go off and play Call of Duty for the rest of my life. Would I do it?
It's tempting. It's tempting.
I don't know if it's that tempting. Now, we've been covering a lot of historical cases lately. And in many of these cases, the culprit's no longer alive. And that's kind of leaving the family there. Like, I'm sure you guys know from watching this show, we're always looking for usually a quote from the family for the end of the script, because we want to really represent their perspective in what's going on here as well. Usually the family of the victim side, but here there's this weird like responsibility that I feel like these families are thrown into, where all of a sudden they find out that a loved one of theirs is a criminal in some way. They had no idea. And now the press comes knocking on their door. I mean, we had it in this example with his wife. It's like, hey, my husband just died. Give me a break.
Yeah.
It really kind of, it just makes me think about what if I was in that situation? What if you were in that situation? Would you feel some level of responsibility? Would you feel like you had to pay back society in some way? Would you feel like, you would have to justify it in some way to media or to people that were coming around? Oh, your dad, huh? It's just, it really hits on a lot of levels for me. Or what do you think about that? If you would find this situation happen in your family and all of a sudden the press is at your door, how do you respond?
I don't know. I don't think you'd know unless you were in that situation, but I also think it would have a lot to do with how you felt about that person.
Yeah. Yeah.
If it's someone you loved, like, he was a good man, he was well liked and whatnot, seeing that side of him for most of his life, I wouldn't want to say anything.
Well, and that's the other thing. Like, we talk about a story like this, and time is just kind of this thing that's almost like points in the story. But, we're talking decades that went on here.
Oh, yeah.
And in those decades, there is almost new history being spun up with these new family members, new loves that are in your life, all that kind of stuff. Does
Hmm.
that mean that his wife never really knew him because she didn't know his old name or, his life before he was 20 years old? Um,
Hmm.
I don't know. I think that's really debatable. I think there's a lot of people that say, well, hold on. They had a lot of decades together. They had a lot of time together. And
Yeah, but ultimately it's based on a lie. So yeah, that one's really debatable.
it is, but in the scope of lies, I mean, I guess a bigger lie is, hey, I'm a criminal
Hmm.
that you're hiding. It's a nonviolent crime. So once again, like
Yeah.
there's so many different levels to this. What name winds up on his tombstone?
Well, he has Randall on his
He
tombstone.
does. Okay.
He does. But what was odd is that he mixed in true information with his new life's information, like his obituary. It had a lot of things in it, such as where he went to school. That was the same. His parents' first names and then his mother's maiden name were used for his parents. So, that checked out.
Did he give his parents his fake last name?
He used his mother's maiden name
Oh, okay.
as their last names. That's
Okay.
what he did. But he did use his date of birth, but he gave the year 2 years off from what he was actually born on. So it's just like an odd mix
Well,
of
this is
things here and
important
there.
though. 2 years earlier or 2 years later than he was actually born?
I believe it was 2 years later.
Okay, so we're showing this guy's intelligence again. I mean, if you're going to rebuild yourself, why not make yourself just a little bit and believably
Hmm.
younger? Like he didn't knock a decade off.
Hmm.
He
Just a
just took
couple of years.
just a couple of years, kind of dropped that. Wow, wow.
Yeah.
And in all these considerations and thinking about these decades that he spent in this new life, and some of the regrets, like we know about the letter to the girlfriend, he's already regretting that he basically had to blow up his old life for this amount of
Hmm.
money. Was it really worth it? It kind of brings up a question, something that I really haven't considered too much before, because we're always really kind of looking for justice and hoping that people serve time and have to face up to what they've done. Hopefully, some type of reform that happens through that process, and then they come out the other side after serving their time and become contributing members to society.
Hmm.
The question here is, can a criminal essentially be reformed without going through that process, without having to sit in jail for 5 years or 10
Hmm.
years or whatever the charge would have been for something like this? Is it possible that the life experience that he went through of having to cut off his old family, his old friends, his old loves, and just leave them in the past, never to be able to go back to it, could that really reform someone?
I think so. I not everybody, but I do think some.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I keep just really struggling with this one. There's a few cases that I've looked into where it seems like the investigators almost respect the people that they're going after, and you kind of
Hmm.
see it in fictional stuff. It comes up kind of strongly too. Like think of The Fugitive or something like that. But um, in this case, I'm kind of getting very strong notes of that, and it's making me think of Conrad more from that kind of humanity perspective, and like, is this a guy that really suffered ultimately because of his choice being a 20-year-old?
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, could he actually reform himself? I don't know. I guess the problem with that is ultimately he did take the money. He never had to pay it back. There was, I mean, did it hurt any one person personally? No, but I'm sure there was an insurance company that had to cover it.
Hmm.
I mean, it's just not a good thing once again for society to do. But
No, no, it's not.
yeah. All right, Christy. Well, thank you so much for your help on today's case. We really appreciate you, and I've got some other people to thank right now. Thank you, PayPal supporters Candy Bishop, Sandy Reed, Drew Woltman, Amanda Beard, and Melissa Heinbach. If you'd like to support the channel, please visit lordnarts.com. There, you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, buy merchandise, or even just buy us a coffee, like Lori King recently did. We always keep commercials limited on this channel. Sometimes there are no commercials at all, and we really appreciate your support in allowing us to continue doing that. Remember, you can get another Lord and Art story every week on the Seriously Mysterious podcast. A new episode is coming tomorrow and every Tuesday after that. Visit seriouslymysterious.com and remember to subscribe on your favorite podcatchers. While you're here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button below and hit that bell icon if you want to catch one of our weekly Secret Studio live shows. And of course, I'll be back with a new Unsolved Mystery for you on Friday, right here on the Lord and Arts Channel.